Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to section 5.3 Central European Monarchs Clash. This is a PowerPoint for the guided reading for this section. So what we're basically doing here is called a flipped classroom, and what that means is I'm going to go over some of the notes, particularly for guided reading here. In this voice recording, you're going to watch this video and fill in the notes you need at home. Now what that's going to do is create more time for us in class to do other things like debates or watch videos or have conversations about the material we've learned. But what this also does is shift the responsibility a little bit more towards you, in that you have to get the notes at home using these videos. So let's get started. The first section for 5.3 guided reading, the question is under the heading of the 30 Years' War. So basically each heading has a couple different questions, and we're going to answer them on here. So the first question actually in your handouts has named 2 causes of the war, but notice I want you to note 3 causes of the 30 Years' War. The first cause is tensions between the Catholics and the Lutheran princes in Germany. The Protestant Reformation had been going on for some time, and there was a lot of tension between these different princes that had different kingdoms within what is now modern-day Germany. So those tensions were one of the reasons that caused the war. Second cause of the 30 Years' War is the fear of the spread of Calvinism. Now, Calvinism was another type of Protestant faith, a Protestant Christian faith, but it was a bit more radical than the Lutherans, and obviously it was different than the Catholics. So neither the Catholics nor the Lutherans wanted Calvinism to spread. Their fear of Calvinism spreading was another thing that led to this war. Finally, a third reason is that Ferdinand II, who was a Catholic, he was the Habsburg ruler of Austria. He wanted to limit Protestantism. And one of the things that he did was he started to close down Protestant churches in Bohemia. Now, there's a huge revolt against this. This is land that he rules over as a Catholic emperor, and he wants to limit Protestantism from expanding there. So he closed their churches, but they revolted against him. And so these revolts in Bohemia, he sent his army in, killed the revolts, and other Protestants around him were not happy about this. So that's a third cause for the 30 Years' War. The Holy Roman Empire, I referred to Germany in the prior slide, but Germany didn't really exist yet. This is a map that shows you what the Holy Roman Empire looked like. If you look at the key on the upper left here, we're at the second bullet point where it says Germany at the end of the 30 Years' War. And you can see that there's all kinds of small territories owned by different groups, different ruling families. And so the Holy Roman Empire wasn't really united. It was very divided into different parts. The Holy Roman Emperor ruled over these areas, but didn't really have much power, especially after the 30 Years' War, over individual kingdoms within there. Now, if you look in the lower right, you can see some of the Habsburg territory, Austria, Vienna, Graz, you can also find Bohemia, which is what we were just talking about in the prior slide. All right, so we're going to note 4 consequences of the war and the Peace of Westphalia. The Peace of Westphalia was the peace treaty signed at the end to end the 30 Years' War. One consequence is that it devastated Germany, or what we refer to as the Holy Roman Empire. And they basically pillaged and robbed and burned and stole all these armies that were going around the Holy Roman Empire. They destroyed the countryside and really hurt Germany. Germany, as a result, wasn't really able to unify as a single country, wasn't really strong enough to back on its feet till the 1800s. Another consequence was that the Habsburg dynasty was weakened. Now remember, the Habsburgs rule over Austria. They also have a control in Spain. And Spain and Austria, both Catholic countries, were both severely weakened by this war. Another consequence is that France gained strength. at the expense of the Habsburgs. They gained some territory in the Holy Roman Empire, modern-day Germany, and they became a stronger country as a result of this war. And finally, this was the last major religious war in Europe. There was so much devastation and fighting between Protestants and Catholics that this is kind of where religious wars ended in Europe for this time period. So you can take a look here. This is a map from your book, actually, on page 170, and they have a square that they're highlighting inside there. And again, you can see how Holy Roman Empire was kind of broken up into lots of smaller or different states. If you look at that square that's been zoomed in, it gives you population losses, and you can really see the devastation of the 30-year wars, the 30 Years' War here. Some areas that are kind of darker or reddish orange, over 66% of the population was destroyed or lost. And you can see in quite a few areas around Bohemia, Bavaria, even in Brandenburg and Silesia, those areas had extreme losses because of this war. All right, we're moving into the second box now. That's called Central Europe. Question 3 says, note two differences between the economies of Western and Central Europe. I've outlined them here for you. First of all, in Western Europe, they had two things happening. They had a commercial revolution, and they were becoming more capitalistic. Now, in the commercial revolution, more people were moving to the cities, away from the countryside and the farms. More people were buying and selling goods in the cities, becoming more capitalistic as time went on. However, in Central Europe, this wasn't happening. Their type of economy was much more feudal and dependent on serf labor. So the serfs worked in the countryside, the lords ruled over them, they had very little freedom, and they weren't allowed to move to cities. And as a result, they were not touched by the commercial revolution in the West. It's a little bit hard to see that West in the bottom there, but that's what you need to know about Central European countries at this time. Now, number 4, I want you to note two reasons why Central European empires were weak. So let's talk about those right now. First of all, Central European countries had very strong nobility. And what that meant was there was a slow development of strong monarchies. It was difficult for the monarchs to be strong and exercise a lot of power, and because the nobles were strong. The example the book gives is that the Polish kingdom, the nobles actually elected the king or the monarch for the time period. And so these Central European countries weren't very strong in terms of their monarchy. Another thing that really weakened Central Europe was the 30 Years' War. And as we looked before, it really weakened the countries and regions and states within the Holy Roman Empire. That's another reason that Central European empires were weak at this time. Now we're moving on to the third and final box about Prussia and Austria. Number 5 asks you to note 3 steps the Habsburgs took to become more powerful, but I am going to go over 5 of them. 5 steps the Habsburgs took to become more powerful. Number 1, they reconquered Bohemia. Now, they had lost control of this area, and actually with the start of Ferdinand II, he took back over this area and asserted his control over Bohemia. Secondly, they wiped out the Protestants in Bohemia. As we mentioned before, Ferdinand II was Catholic. He wanted Bohemia to be Catholic as well, and so he started to eliminate Protestantism in that region. They also created a loyal Czech nobility. Now, Bohemia is actually a region that's in modern-day Czech Republic, and what the Habsburgs did was they took out the nobility that was there and replaced them with nobles that would be loyal to them. Obviously, if you weren't a noble before and the Habsburgs made you a noble, you were therefore going to be loyal to them. So in order to become more powerful, especially in this area, they created a loyal Czech nobility. Also, they created a standing army. Now, as we've mentioned before, a standing army is an army that's available and around and ready to go even in peacetime. And so that makes some of these royal families much stronger because they have soldiers at their disposal whenever they need them. Finally, the Habsburgs centralized their authority, and that means that they made their position, the emperor or the king, much more powerful. They took power away from the nobles so that they could rule more directly and have more power over the entire country that they ruled over. Okay, last one, number 6. Note 4 steps the Hohenzollerners took to build up their state. And actually in your paper it says 3, but we're going to name 4 steps. 4 steps that the Hohenzollerns took. Now the Hohenzollerns were the ruling family over Prussia. Make sure you know that. That's important. First of all, they had a strong standing army. They had one of the strongest armies in Europe. You notice this is quite similar to what Austria did, but the Hohenzollerns made a strong standing army that were ready to fight at all times. They also created a military state, and by this I mean the kind of a country that believes a lot in their military. People send their sons to fight in the military. The military is a very important aspect of this country at the time period, Prussia. 3, they had permanent taxes. Oftentimes in the past, people would have taxes for certain periods of time. Over the time period, the taxes would expire, and then they didn't have the taxes anymore. And rulers in particular would raise taxes when they had to fight in a war or do some other kind of endeavor. Now, having permanent taxes helped them be able to pay for the standing army. They had income coming in from their subjects on a permanent basis, not temporary. It was always coming in. So that allowed them to afford to have this large standing army that was so strong. And finally, the Junkers, the landowning nobility that lived in Prussia that were working under the Hohenzollerns during their time in power. I put in quotes bribes. In other words, they kind of paid them off, the Junkers, with high military positions. So the Hohenzollerns decided, you know what? In order for us to have control over this group of land-owning nobility, the Junkers, we need to give them something that they will give us more power and let us be able to do what we want. And so they offered them high military positions. They were the officers in the army, and this was a very prestigious role for them to have. And again, this feeds back into number 2, military state, where the landowning nobility, the Junkers, are the officers. And this continued for many years later, all the way in towards World War II, when you have these Prussian nobility that are officers in the army and contribute to the militaristic state of Germany later on. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys in class tomorrow.